Hello. I wanted to be able to go over just a few things with you as far as Excel goes for this coming week. We are going to focus a little bit on formatting of spreadsheets. And so I have some data put into a spreadsheet here, and I'm just going to step you through some of the skills that you're going to be working with on your assignments. When you have a spreadsheet and someone has given it to you, maybe they've imported it from somewhere, and so you'll see that you have a bunch of data within your spreadsheet. You'll notice that some of that data is difficult to be able to view. So one of the things that you want to do before you ever turn in a completed spreadsheet is to make sure that all of your data is fully visible. Now please remember that when you modify the width of your cells or the height of your rows, and you go in and do some other formatting, like maybe you change the font size of a title or you bold something, you may no longer be able to see all of the data. So you may need to do an adjustment again at the end. So what I want to do right here is I want you to take a look at a couple of things. Number one, we can see that it appears that we have data in columns A, B, and C at this point. And then we have some data in rows 1 through 12. When you look carefully at column A, you can see that the monthly expenses, that's supposed to be the title. Notice how the column border or the boundary between A and B is kind of grayed out as you follow that through that column. That's because the text goes beyond or spills over into the next column. It is all column A text, and so we need to adjust the column width so we can see it. And as you come down here and read these words, you run into the same problem. You cannot view all of that text. So what we want to do, there are a couple of different ways that you can adjust the width of your columns. The first thing is I could go right up to this column and say, oh, okay, so all of this text should be in A. Let me double click on the boundary between A and B, and notice I'm in the column header, not in the column itself, but in the header to get that double-headed black arrow. So then I double click, and now I've adjusted the text to the longest entry in that column. So in this particular case, the longest entry appears to be accounting services. Then we have these other columns over here. Notice how this kind of looks awkward, where you've got monthly expenses in January 2013. It should really extend across the width of your spreadsheet. So in order for that to happen, we need to do what's called merging and centering. So if I just take my cell pointer and left click and drag from A through C, and then come up here under the Home tab, under the alignment grouping, I can see merge and center. And if I just click on that, it will merge and center the text in those cells. It merges them together. You also have the option just to merge across or merge cells so that you don't have to center them. But most times when you're working with that option, you're going to merge and center. It appears that I should do the same thing with row 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and why would we do these things? Because we want to make them visually more readable as an audience. We want to be able to understand what it is that we're looking at, and so we make those adjustments. Now, if for some reason when you're working with the width of the columns, let's say that you want to make them all the same width. So if I get the black drop down arrow up here under the column header and I left click and drag through A, B, and C, if I double click, it's going to automatically adjust those to the longest entries in the cells, but you'll notice that these look kind of squished and kind of small. So if I come back and I left click and drag from A through C, what I can do is I can pick any one of these 3 boundaries and I can left click and I can drag. Notice how you've got the screen tip up there that's moving from like 8.86 to 9.29. If I wanted them to be 10, I could drag it until they're at 10. So now they're all 10, but this one is too small. That's one way to do it. The other thing that you can do is you can go to your format cells. So under the Home tab, under the cells grouping, go to the format option, click the drop down arrow and go to column width. And then from there, you could make them all the same width, just like you can by dragging it. I'm just going to do 15. So I type in 15, click OK. Now they're all 15. Honestly, for this first column, still not wide enough. So I'm going to go back to the drop down and I'm going to go to column width, and this time I'm going to choose like 20.25 and click OK. That's wide enough. So I can click off of there. So it's wide enough for that column. Do I necessarily need budget and actual to be that same width? Not really. I could come back and left click and drag B and C, and then I could adjust that shorter. You know, maybe that, I don't know, 14 is good enough. That looks a lot better. So what are some other things that we can do when we're formatting or working with our cells to make this look better? Well, one thing that I could do is I could highlight the title area, and I could make the font size bigger. I could change the font style, but you guys, when you're working with a spreadsheet, your font style should match all the way through. So if you're going to change it from Calibri for one cell, you need to change it all from all the cells so that they're the same. But maybe I want to change the font color. So just like we would do in Word, click on a font color, pick whatever you want it to be, make sure you can read it, and change it. This January 2013, I'm going to backspace out of there and make it 2020. Now I could highlight that, and maybe I'm going to make that a little larger. So maybe we're going to make that a 12 instead of a 11, just so it's a little larger. Maybe I want to bold these labels, or these headings, we might call them, so that they stand out a little bit more. Maybe you want to center those. You could highlight those and come up to the alignment grouping and center them. So these are some of the skills that we learned how to work with in Word. I could highlight these two cells, and I could bold those if I wanted to. Again, all I'm trying to do is make this a little bit easier for whoever's looking at it to be able to interpret or understand. So maybe I want January to be different than monthly expenses. So I choose monthly expenses in row 1, and I'm going to go to the shading bucket. Please remember, just like we did in Word, font color is different than fill color or shading. Fill color is shading. So let me go ahead and pick the dark blue, not the dark blue, the regular blue for monthly expenses. Let's change that font color to black so I can read it. And then I'm going to go to January 2020, and I'm going to make that fill color a light blue, just to give it a little contrast. And that may help the audience see it a little bit better. So it looks pretty good. If for some reason I thought that I needed to insert a row, maybe I want a divider row between 2 and 3. I could right click, or I could come out and left click on the 3 in the header, right click and choose insert, and then I can insert a blank row. Don't know why I would necessarily want to do that, but you can do that. If I want to delete a row, I right click and I just choose delete. If I want to insert a column, so maybe I have something besides budget and actual, I could click on C, I could right click, and I could insert, and it's going to insert the column to the left. By clicking on the paintbrush, it's going to keep whatever formatting I was using. If I want to delete that column, all I have to do is right click on it and choose delete, and I can delete. You can also work with the addition of columns and rows by going from the Home tab over here to the Cells grouping, and you can insert and delete your columns and rows from there as well. Okay, so the next thing I'm taking a look at here is I have some numbers. It appears to me when we're talking about budget and actual expenses, we're dealing with money. But before I format that into money, you know, I'm probably going to need a total. Whenever you're working with anything that you're trying to do a mathematical computation on, you need to have them labeled so that your viewers know what it is that you're placing there. So I'm just going to come down to cell A13 and I'm going to type the word total. I don't know what else to add there. I'm going to bold it, and you can justify those words in your cell. By default, text is always left justified. Numbers are always right justified, as you can see in your cells. If I wanted this to be aligned differently, I could simply just highlight that, and I could go in here and I could choose to, left justify that so that it's closer to the numbers. So all I did was I left justified it. Then I need to put a formula in here. I want to know what the budget is. You know, I'm an employer. What's my budget? So we've learned to use the auto sum button. We can press the equal sign. We can come up here under the editing grouping and click on auto sum. Click the drop down and choose sum. And then it chooses the range of cells. Remember, if it's the incorrect range of cells, just left click and drag through what it should be. The range of cells is a function word. That just means that the computation is stored within that word. So equals sum. Sum lets us know it's going to add. The first cell in the range of cells in this case is B4, and the last one is B12. And so it's surrounded in parentheses. I simply press enter, and I've got a total there. Now, I can do the same formula over here, or what we learned last week was you can click on the little green fill handle with the black plus sign and drag that across, and it will fill that formula across for you relative to the position in the formula. So that's one way to go ahead and total things up. What if I wanted to know what my average budget was? I could highlight that. Again, I could bold it. I could go back and I could right justify it. And then I'm going to use the average function. So I could come to my auto sum button, click the drop down, choose average. Obviously that is not the correct range of cells. So just left click and drag through the range of cells that, You can either right or you can left click and drag through your range of cells. So in this case, I just need through B13, So B3 colon B13, press enter, and that gave me the average, and I can fill that across. So B4 through through B12, not B13, through B12. And here it picked up some, we want average. Let me just start that again. Equals, we'll come to auto sum, we'll click on average. I might have to click on it twice. The range of cells should be B4 through B12. So just left click and drag back through. I don't want the total as part of my average. And then press enter. And then you can fill that across. So there's your average. Okay, so as we're working with that, maybe we want to know the average. Well, no, that's good. Let's go ahead and format the cells. So we'll just format all the cells. Since we're dealing with money, let's just select those and then come up here to the number grouping. Again, everything we've been doing is under the Home tab. So I'm going to go ahead and click the drop down, choose currency. I need the decimal places, so I'm just going to leave that. I can increase and decrease decimal places if I want to by just clicking increase or decrease by using these little icons underneath my numbers grouping. So I believe that covers all of the concepts that we need to talk about this week, working with the two Excel assignments that you have to do. Again, a lot of what you do when you format cells is you're just trying to make your spreadsheet easier to be viewed by your audience. I did give you some tutorial links in your assignments that you can go ahead and take a look at. Hopefully most of what we did was a review from what we had talked about last week and from the tutorials you were supposed to have read last week. So now we're just kind of putting it into play. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Thanks.